You're watching Eye on Africa. I'm James Creedon. Here are our headlines this evening. Hundreds of Sudanese protesters have demanded the dismissal of the UN mission chief who was working to resolve a political crisis sparked by last year's military coup. We'll bring you more from our correspondent in Khartoum. Relations between DR Congo and Rwanda continue to be tense this week. 2 Rwandan soldiers have been released, however, in peace talks mediated by Angola. More on that coming up. And the winner of a top architecture award is given a hero's welcome in Ouagadougou. More on that later on in the bulletin. Thank you for watching. Now, they gathered in their hundreds outside the UN's mission headquarters in Khartoum. Those demonstrating want to see the special representative Volker Perthes leave. We've had 7 months now of sporadic protests in Khartoum because of the military seizing the full reins of power in October. Now, earlier I spoke to Naba Mohiuddin about the mood in the Sudanese capital. Let's take a listen.
Some of the groups are probably or likely it's belonging to the former regime gathered around the UN headquarters, refusing the interference of, they said it's interference of the UNITAMS or the political mission in Sudan. They said the dialogue should be a Sudanese dialogue, and the solution should be also Sudanese solution, saying that the UNITAMS and the African Union, the IGAD tripartite mechanism is interfering in the political scene, which is the majority of Sudanese people think this is incorrect or inaccurate, because after long months of a deadlock, the UNITAMS and African Union and IGAD are trying to make a breakthrough in the political scene. Everybody knows that the Sudanese are putting great hopes on the solutions, or at least in the initiative by the UNITAMS and African Union. So yes, it's one of the voices in the capital. The protest against the UNITAMS, but the voice of other people who want a solution, who want the deadlock to end soon, and who want the resumption of the international aid for Sudan to be done very soon. As we know that there is a deadline.
Tell us a little bit about the release of prisoners, because that is one area where there has been movement in the past week. Quite a number of prisoners were released in Port Sudan and in Khartoum, but many, many more remain in custody. What do we know about the conditions in which they're being held, and to what extent might those prisoner releases calm the anger of the protest movement?
Yes, actually, some of the prisoners were released, but the prisoners are 40, the political prisoners, while some of them are still in detention, facing really serious accusations like the killing of the police officer on January 17th. 4 of the protesters, some of them are only 17 and 18 years old, so some of them are facing undefined future. People are so angry. They think lifting of the state of emergency is a good sign or could represent a goodwill by the military
tell us about,
rulers.
because that's another thing, just to make that clear for our viewers. This a state of emergency that was in place for quite a while was lifted earlier this week. So what does that change, actually? What's the difference between the state of emergency and no state of emergency for day-to-day life?
Actually, we cannot predict. It's really very soon to predict what the changes will be, because it's very reliant on the reaction by the military rulers. We are waiting for mass demonstrations on June the 3rd, the anniversary of the massacre, and other demonstrations against the talks itself. So if the repression continue against the pro-democracy groups, and if the violence continue and the crackdown, we think, and everybody thinks, that nothing will change. But for now, there is some sense of confidence between military rulers and civilians that they can sit again on a table. But it depends on the following days and weeks.
In DR Congo, the authorities have agreed to release 2 Rwandan soldiers detained amid soaring tensions between the two neighbours. The announcement was made by the Angolan president, João Lourenço, who is acting as a mediator between the two sides. Now, what brought things to this degree of tension between Rwanda and DR Congo? Protests are now being held in Congolese cities, pointing the finger of blame at Rwanda for meddling. All of the background to that with Laurent Berstecker.
As tensions continue to rise between Kigali and Kinshasa, Rwanda's foreign minister firmly rejected allegations his country was backing the M23 rebels.
There's no presence of Rwandan soldiers in DRC, and from there, there could not be any collaboration with any other force present in Eastern DRC.
Kinshasa has repeatedly accused Kigali of backing the M23 insurrection in eastern DRC, but didn't produce any evidence to back up this claim. Thousands of protesters also took to the streets of Bukavu on Wednesday to denounce Rwanda's alleged interference in the conflict. Faced with an escalating diplomatic crisis, the United Nations called on both countries to appease tensions and reiterated its support to the Congolese army in its fight against the M23.
The MONUSCO is using all means at its disposal, including helicopters, to fight back and support the Congolese army. We need to de-escalate the situation as soon as possible, while ensuring a regional and international response.
A recent string of attacks by the M23 group in eastern DRC have revived historical tensions with neighboring Rwanda. Both countries are now accusing each other of backing armed groups operating in their respective territories. Trying to diffuse tensions, the African Union recently launched a mediation effort between the two sides. And on Wednesday, both countries' leaders agreed to speak to each other in the coming days to try to solve the ongoing crisis.
A UN report published earlier in the week pointed to a shocking rise in human rights violations and killings in Mali, with the army and foreign military elements heavily implicated. It recorded 320 human rights abuses perpetrated by the Malian armed forces in the first quarter of 2022. That's an increase of more than 900% compared to the same period last year. On Wednesday, the Malian Foreign Ministry issued a rebuttal, arguing that the UN report constituted a smear campaign designed to undermine the interim government, which took power following a coup in 2021. Sam Bradpeace has all the details.
When soldiers in Mali staged their second military coup in less than a year in 2021, they said that the new regime would do better at dealing with some of the country's security problems. So they were, of course, disappointed when earlier this week the UN mission to Mali released a report which essentially said that violations of human rights and killings in the country were sharply on the rise. The UN pointed the finger at the Malian armed forces and what it called foreign military elements, by which it's understood we're talking about Russia, who it said had committed a number of atrocities in the context of ongoing anti-terror operations. The UN said its investigators had been denied access to an alleged massacre site in Mora, where close to 300 male civilians are thought to have been executed. A statement from the Malian Foreign Ministry gave quite a strong rebuttal to these claims. It said that any allegations of wrongdoing on the part of the Malian state were part of a smear campaign to undermine the interim government, which is looking increasingly isolated on the international stage. It previously said that it would lead its own investigation into the alleged crimes in that central town of Mora, but very few people doubt that any state-led inquiry will lead to genuine accountability.
A UN peacekeeper was killed and 3 others injured in an attack on their convoy in Kidal, northern Mali. That's according to the UN MINUSMA mission. The casualties were members of the MINUSMA's Jordanian contingent. The incident occurred when the peacekeepers' convoy faced direct fire from small arms and rocket-propelled grenades for about 1 hour. The mission spokesman said French forces intervened after the attack by carrying out reassurance flights. Since 2012, Mali has been battling violence orchestrated by militants in northern and central Mali, targeting soldiers and civilians. Tunisia's powerful UGTT union has called for a national public strike for June after the government refused to increase wages. That escalation may hinder the government's efforts to reach a deal with the International Monetary Fund. Tunisia faces a serious financial crisis and is seeking a $4 billion loan from the IMF. That loan is seen as necessary to ward off national bankruptcy in exchange for unpopular reforms, including cuts in food and energy subsidies and wage freezes. Earlier this week, Burkina Faso-born architect Diebedo Francis Kéré was given a hero's welcome at a festive ceremony in his honour in Ouagadougou. He was the first African to win the Pritzker Prize. For 40 years, it is considered one of the most prestigious awards in the world of architecture. Let's take a look at that celebration.
I feel pride, I feel great respect, and a feeling of gratitude to these people, of which my family is part of. They encouraged me and gave me the fighting spirit that has accompanied me. Coming back today and meeting the authorities of this country is an honor to me once again. It gives me hope and it tells me I feel at home on Burkina Bay soil, my land where I was born, and I'd just like to say thank you.
This prize has put Burkina Faso on the map. It's great recognition, so it makes us proud. It's a huge joy for our country.
I am really, really very happy. I don't know what to say. Words fail me. I am so proud.
That's all for tonight's edition of Eye on Africa. Thank you for watching.